In the 100 years post-emancipation, over 4,000 black people were lynched in the United States of America. Over 600 of them in my state of Georgia and at least 3 in Glenn County. Many of our leaders at the time didn't publicly speak out or condemn lynching for fear of agitating the white community a little too much and putting themselves in further danger of being lynched themselves. Ida B. Wells is not one of those leaders, and after one of her own friends was lynched in Memphis, she decided to educate millions about what was really going on in the South. Ida Bell Wells was born enslaved on July 16, 1862 in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Her father James was born to an enslaved woman named Peggy, and she was violated by his father, who was a slave owner. His father brought him to Holly Springs at about 18 years old to be leased out as a carpenter's apprentice, but he was still enslaved at the end of the day. Miss Wells' mother was named Elizabeth, and she went by Lizzie. She was born in Virginia as one of 10 children and sold away from her family at a young age. Once the Wells family was free, Mr. James became a trustee at Shaw College, the local HBCU, as well as a successful carpenter, and her mother Lizzie was known as an excellent cook. Like many other Africans after emancipation, they still had to keep working for the man who had once owned them, even after they had become free. Ida was the oldest child of 8, and less than 15 years after emancipation, Ida was already a college-educated black woman on her road to success. But in September of 1878, a yellow fever hit Holly Springs, taking Ida's parents and a younger sibling. Ida had been visiting her grandmother when they got sick, and returned to find out that others in the family were planning to split the siblings up. She was only about 16 years old, but she immediately felt like she was 18 and found a teaching job at a local elementary school so that she could provide for herself and her siblings. She took care of all them for a couple years until her 2 brothers were able to find apprenticeships, and at this point her and her 2 younger sisters moved to Memphis with her aunt. She found a job as a teacher and an editor of a local newspaper, while also attending local HBCUs during the summers to continue her education. On May 4, 1884, Ida had paid for a seat in the more spacious upper-class ladies' car like she had done many days before. But this specific day, she was ordered by a conductor to go to the back. She refused, and even though she was only 4'11" and small in stature, she didn't leave without a fight. It took 3 men to get her out of the train, and even then, she didn't stop fighting. She sued the railroad company in local courts and won a $500 settlement. The company appealed it though, and they took it to a higher court, and the higher court ruled in their favor, and they was kind of just being nitpicky about Ida B. Wells even having the audacity to even take this to court, and they actually made her give some of the money back. She said, "I felt so disappointed because I had hoped such great things from my suit for my people. Oh God, is there no justice in this land for us?" Like a lot of other black folks, Miss Wells had a belief in the ideals and the words of America, but she began to realize more and more how untrue these were for anyone who was African. She began to go beyond only editing and began writing her own weekly editorials, confronting racial biases within the country and even within her own workplace. This led to her eventually losing her teacher job in 1891, but this only gave her an opportunity to take journalism even more serious and even buy a piece of the Memphis Free Speech, a radical black newspaper. In 1892, one of Miss Wells' best friends, Thomas Moss, the father of her goddaughter and the owner of People Grocery Store, a black-owned grocery store in Memphis that had a series of altercations with the owner of a nearby white grocery store that was now having a little bit of financial troubles from having to compete with Mr. Moss. On March 5, 1892, a group of 6 white men came to the People's Grocery Store looking for trouble, and they got met back with bullets. Eventually, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and William Stewart were arrested for defending themselves, and the event was spun by the white media as some type of black aggression towards peaceful whites. 4 days later, 75 white men kidnapped them from their jail and lynched them. Miss Wells was devastated. She began to speak out more and more in her press and urging Africans to leave the South and Memphis altogether. She wrote, "There is therefore only one thing left to do: save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property, nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but takes us out and murders us in cold blood when accused by white persons." She also began to speak out against lynching and even do her own investigative journalism. She was actually one of the first investigative journalists around lynching by traveling throughout the South and taking eyewitness accounts. Eventually, she published an article denouncing the myth that black men were serial rapists who deserved to be lynched, and even alluded to the fact that white women regularly consented to sex with black men. White newspapers reprinted it and said that the fact that she wasn't even dead yet was a proof of their patience, and others called for her to be burned at the stake immediately. Luckily, she was able to escape to New York, but the Memphis Free Speech was destroyed, and to this day there are no surviving copies of the paper. Once she got to New York, being the strong black businesswoman that she was able to leverage the subscription list of the Memphis paper to get part ownership in the New York Age. She used her opportunity as a free person in the North to highlight the horrors Africans were still facing in the South, even after war. On October 26, 1892, she started publishing Southern Horrors, Lynch Law and All Its Horrors. In the pamphlet, she highlighted evidence that a majority of black men lynched had been falsely accused of rape when they were in real life lynched because they was getting a little too far ahead of those white folks who were supposed to be superior. She herself protected herself with a pistol and encouraged those who did stay in the South to protect themselves by arming themselves. When the United States held a huge World Fair in 1893 to just showcase how far they had came and how much development they did and how many people they killed, Frederick Douglass was there representing the Republic of Haiti. And even though she didn't really want to be there, she went ahead and went and started protesting. As a part of her protest, she passed out over 10,000 pamphlets that her, Frederick Douglass, and Ferdinand Barnett had put together, explaining to people why and how the African in America had been systematically left out of all American dealings, including this event. She also took the fight globally by traveling to England a couple times. The first time Frederick Douglass was supposed to go, and he couldn't due to his health, and he gave the blessing for her to go in his place. She was very well received there, and she met with members of the British Parliament, and she even played a role in establishing the London Anti-Lynching Committee, probably the first anti-lynching committee in all of the world. In 1895, she published The Red Record, a pamphlet diving deep into the plight of Africans in America and the truth around lynching. The more she studied and educated, she realized that lynching would not go away by just appealing to the emotions of white people or trying to get them to convince themselves that we are human or for them to even act like regular humans, and she started to advocate more and more for more direct black resistance. On July 27, 1895, she married to Ferdinand Lee Barnett, a prominent black lawyer in Chicago that she had been working with for years. Together they had 4 children, including the Ida B. Wells-Barnett Jr., and their relationship was just as much a work relationship as it was love. They continued to make progress for the race together as a true power couple. Ms. Wells-Barnett had always been far from a fool though, and even before they was married, she was able to secure part ownership in the Chicago Conservative, the first black newspaper in Chicago that Mr. Barnett is the one that started. As a mother, she didn't do as much traveling and started really focusing on the black community in Chicago. She created Chicago's first black preschool in a lecture room for the Bethel AME Church, and she organized the Women's Era Club, one of the first black women's clubs for Chicago civic engagement. And she was a founding member of the National Association of Colored Women. She also opened up a little weekly get-together spot for young black men in Chicago who she realized needed something to take them away from unemployment and staying out on the streets gambling through the day. She was one of those black leaders who didn't look down at the regular black people or whatever, and just because she had a little bit of money, she still realized that we all was in the same situation at the end of the day. And even though Miss Ida did so much work for our community and was such an influential person, many of our history books still leave her out, and a lot of the black upper class at the time didn't really support her. Many of the black elite of yesterday and today suffered deeply from sexism and this whole white patriarchy thing. And for example, although Ms. Wells was present at the creation of the NAACP, Du Bois ended up leaving her name off of the founders list. The NAACP didn't even start advocating against lynching until 1916, 20 years after Ms. Wells was publishing factual information about the atrocity of lynching. Ms. Wells-Barnett is also said to have been sad and hurt when Carter G. Woodson, the father of black history, failed to include her works in his famous publication. Even without cosigns from other black leaders and organizations, Ms. Wells did what she had to do for the race and did a hell of a job. Without her, none of us would be where we are today. Ms. Wells made transition on March 25, 1931 at only 68 years old, and she's buried next to her husband at Oakwood Cemetery in Chicago. In this information age and everything at our fingertips, I feel like there's no reason for every black child not to learn the true black history. And that's my goal, to raise the consciousness of billions of black folks around the world. If you want to help me on the journey, leave a like and subscribe. And if you have suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments. Peace.